All right, how's everybody doing? Welcome back. If you're new here, stick around. You won't be disappointed. We're gonna get into some Stephen A. on Sean Hannity, the most unlikely of friends, but Stephen A. is always interesting to get his perspective. He's a pretty lively dude. Sean's pretty milk toasty, but he ain't afraid to say what he thinks, and neither am I. Let's get into it.
I think it's important to set the record straight. Putin's invasion of Europe was not just made possible by our weak European allies, but also past Democratic presidents played a huge role. Take a look.
But we ain't gonna act like he caused this now. It's Democrats in office. It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place, courtesy of Russia's instigation, no matter what they try to say to Trump. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration.
Damn. Let's give credit where credit is due, Stephen A. Credit to you, sir. He got some wild takes, but he's hitting the nail on the head on this one.
It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States.
That was probably by design. I mean, who needs Ukraine to be strong? If they're weak, then they have to buy U.S. goods. Come on now.
And now here they are having to beg for support that they're owed because of what we promised them as a nation. We promised them this. You owe it to the Ukrainians. You absolutely do. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I like spending billions of our taxpayer dollars to them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is promises made are supposed to be promises kept.
I gotta say this. I have been super opposed to Ukrainians. Well, not Ukrainians so much, but Ukraine getting so much of U.S. taxpayer dollars. But that might be the strongest argument I have ever heard as to why they deserve it. That is a solid argument.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Here now with more ESPN host Stephen A. Smith. You know what the liberal media does every time you're on? You're on. No matter if we're having a fun exchange as friends. Stephen A. schools Hannity. Doesn't matter if I'm just letting you talk, letting you rant and rave. I would say that listening to you on your podcast, you sound more like me every day. I would argue you have been hacked.
The common sense starts taking over. It starts infecting the brain, and you're like, all right, I've been lied to.
Sanitized. I would argue I've been a great influence for you in your life.
I will never, ever, ever concede or confess to such a stain. Hell no, I'm not giving you that. But I will say,
we all got some friends that are like completely opposite politically, but at the end of the day, it's all good. You're just like, whatever, man, go get a beer.
I will say that when it comes to politics, I am schooled more by you than you are by me. There is no doubt about that. Sports is my lane. I'm venturing into politics. Politics is your lane.
But I go into the sports lane, it's bad. I go down your lane. Don't let me say stop.
Don't let me get started with your Tebow takes. Don't even let me throw that up at you. But I will say this: as I venture into this lane, one of the things that I'll say is that I just think it's important. Listen, what you know is what you know. What you don't know is what you don't know. But when you know stuff and then you omit it on purpose, I'm going to have an issue with that. And I think in the case of this Russia-Ukraine conflict, I thought it was important to defer back to history, recognizing what Clinton did in 1994 when he visited Ukraine and he compelled them to give up 1,900 nuclear warheads, or that they ultimately returned to Russia. I think it's important for us to remember that. In 2014, when they invaded Crimea and they took over that and they wanted lethal aid, and the Obama administration sent non-lethal aid because they didn't want to engage the U.S. in a U.S.-Russia proxy war. That's actually happened under his administration. When you think about what transpired in 2022 and how it's a full-fledged war, it doesn't escape me that that's something that happened. Now, obviously, under Republican leadership, they also took over Georgia, if I remember correctly. So we're not pointing all the fingers at the Democratic Party. But in the end, if we're going to tell a story, let's tell a story to the American people and give them a clear depiction of what's transpiring before our very eyes. And when I see a flagrant intent not to do that, just because you want to get at Trump, listen, I don't hesitate to.
You know what they call that? They call that malinformation. That is called malinformation. You got misinformation, you got disinformation. Misinformation is accidental usage of information. You got disinformation, which is intentional, meaning you are intentionally trying to deceive people. Then you have malinformation, which is what Stephen A is talking about here. Malinformation is when it's factual but is inconvenient to the controlling party or the state. So bravo to him for calling it out.
Criticize the president when I feel he deserves it. Donald Trump, as far as I'm concerned, has had a few occasions where he deserves criticism. But on this particular situation, he's done more than we've seen any Democrat in office try to do when it comes to Russia. And I just don't get it. So I said so, and I don't regret it.
You know, I mean, it is kind of interesting if you look at Egypt, Ethiopia, if you look at Iran and Israel, if you look at all the varying, Rwanda, if you look at the Congo, if you look at, all these India, Pakistan, there's 7 separate conflicts. You would not have picked Donald Trump at the top of your list, Stephen A. Smith, because we've had way too many conversations as the guy that is willing to expend the political capital with not much benefit for him politically.
That's fair.
But there's a lot of downside. There's a lot of risks that people will scream failure, failure, failure. And he's been successful 7 times. I've put that list up many, many times on this show. I'll put it up again as you speak. But he's been successful help playing a part.
What I have said to you, what I've argued and pushed back with you is that a ceasefire, a pause in the conflict is not the end.
I mean, let's turn our attention to this list that's clearly in the center of the screen here. They just said 7 conflicts. What's it been? So January, we'll go February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Ugh. He's gotten a conflict a month. That's insane. Is he even being considered for the Nobel Peace Prize? Obama gave a couple crappy speeches. He got the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know. 7 conflicts in 7 months? That sounds like a record.
End of a war. So I've pushed back on you against that because sometimes there's so many people fawning over Donald Trump that they negate to make that point. But there is no doubt that he has done more than practically almost any administration has tried to do when it comes to ending conflicts.
Dang, it looks like Israel was at war with like 10 people
around the world. And he's put himself in a position where the political capital that he stands to gain isn't necessarily that great. So his willingness to do so is obviously something that shouldn't be ignored and something that should be, dare I say, applauded to some degree. Again, that doesn't mean I like everything he does. You and I can argue back.
See, this is what he's doing. He's giving out kudos, but then he says, but I don't like everything. So eventually what's going to happen next with Stephen A, we'll give it a year or 2. He's going to stop apologizing for liking him. And then he's going to be full-blown common sense. That's what's going to happen. You heard it here first.
I thought about a few things, but in the end, you are absolutely right when you point out that there's not much to gain for him in a lot of this, yet he engages anyway, and you have to give credit where credit is.
I'm hearing that. All right, so let me ask you this. I think your party has a problem. We've talked a lot about it. You mentioned Clinton really sold out the Ukrainians. You're right. Obama did nothing. He didn't lift a finger when they annexed Crimea. Joe Biden did nothing except said don't when he was building up.
That was Kamala Harris. Remember that? She was like, don't. And then even the reporter's like, that's it? And she's like, don't. Yeah, that would terrify Putin, let me tell you. Terrify him a lot more than a bomber and a whole flight wing flying over his head the second he walks out. That's how you handle guys like Putin.
Troops and military might on the Ukrainian border. Putin was. So really, the party that betrayed Ukraine is the Democratic Party. Now the party seems to want Donald Trump to fail on every front. I would think that it would be in everybody's best interest. I don't know what's happened to your party. They're the party that cares about the rights of illegals over the safety of Americans, the party that cares about men's rights to play women's sports, the party that wants defund, dismantle, no bail laws, and your party, the party of Mamdani, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Pocahontas, and Grandpa Bernie.
Dang. I always say this, the Democrats, the left, I'd say the left more than like traditional Democrats, which are hard to come by nowadays, but the left picks the craziest hills to die on. Like if the hill you're going to die on is allowing underage children to get transgender surgery, I don't think that's a very common issue for families in America. I don't think that's like something that we're concerned about very much. I'm not. Um, if the hill to die on for you is allowing more illegals due process, America's already voted. They want illegals out. That's a weird hill to die on, especially when atrocities keep coming at the on the or excuse me at the expense of American citizens by illegals. It's a weird hill to die on.
That's your party, and I don't
I,
understand. You don't
I keep,
seem
I,
like
I,
that.
I keep telling you to stop calling it my party. I think the party needs to be
It is
purged.
your
I
party.
told you. You know, I don't believe they
Is it your
represent,
party?
what historical Democrats stood for. I think it's entirely different
it
right
your
now. I
party?
think it's problematic.
That's true
And,
too.
well, listen, again, I don't feel that way. I'm a centrist.
I don't care
I'm not
if you
like these.
All right. This was awesome. I love watching these two go at it. Stephen A just blew my mind just now. He did an absolutely fantastic job for a guy who's just dabbling in politics. You could tell he's taking it seriously. Um, this was a real fun watch. If you're still here, I really appreciate you. Like and subscribe. Come back for more.